Hello, welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast, where we talk with writers from all mediums and genres about themselves, their work, and advice they have for writers. I'm your host, Paul Zeidman. My guest today is comedy writer slash stand-up comedian Dan Cronin. Dan, welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast.
Thanks, Paul. Good to see you. Let's do this. Let's
Yes,
talk.
let's
Let's chat.
Let's do this indeed. Really looking forward to talking to Dan about his career as comedy writer and also stand-up comedian. And also, we're going to touch a little bit about his most recent experience writing for Conan O'Brien, hosting the Oscars. I think he did it this year and last year. So
That's
th
right.
that'll be some great delving into. But for those who
Mhm.
are familiar with the show, we like to start things off talking about things we may have read or watched recently. Did we like it? Did we hate it? Are we very indifferent about it? I'll go first just to give Dan a little time to collect his thoughts. So I've got a couple of
Mhm.
things. If you are in the mood for a very short and compact film with a protagonist who doesn't have one single word of dialogue, but he screams and yells a lot and a lot of grunts and a lot of cartoonishly over the top violence, then Sisu: Road to Revenge is the movie for you. It's a sequel to a movie from a couple of years ago called Sisu, which is pretty much angry Finnish ex-commando takes on the first one was he takes on the Nazis. This one he takes on the Russians. And again, the guy has absolutely no dialogue throughout the entire movie. It's just a lot of ridiculous taking out of Russian soldiers. It's a lot of fun, probably like hour 30,
Yeah.
hour 35. So if you want to put that on, that's not a put it on, do laundry type of movie. That's sit and watch and just revel in the amazing special effects and the hats off to the makeup people. I think they had about 10 people doing makeup on that movie because they need it.
Oh,
The other
cool.
thing is, I'm a big Doctor Who fan, and for those who are in the know, about a month and a half ago, they found two episodes from a show that hasn't seen the light of day since like 1965, and so those were released over the weekend in the UK and also on YouTube. Watch those; a lot of fun. The show cost about $5 to produce, really
Mhm.
shows it, but it was still a lot of fun. And on the reading, I was digging through the closet and dug up the Complete Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. I've read this a long time ago when it first came out. Saw the movie, which is I think yeah like 2007. I had totally forgot how incredibly depressing and upsetting this book is because it's about her life growing up in pre-revolutionary Iran and then everything that happens to her after that. And I'm almost done with it, but boy, is it a really depressing book. But it's very
Oh,
well
my.
done. I will say that. That's it for my end. Dan, what about you?
Well, we mentioned taking on Russians and Nazis. It kind of reminded me of Inglorious Bastards, which I
Okay.
recently rewatched, and that is a good movie. That is really fun to watch Christoph Waltz and
Hmm.
great soundtrack. Recently rewatched that. A couple of my classic rewatches, including one that has really seemed to have made the circuit among fathers of teenagers, which I was a few years ago. My girls are now graduating college, unbelievably. But the movie Midnight Run,
Oh, okay.
that really had a resurgence recently. It just seemed to be a lot of people were watching that with Charles Grodin, Robert De Niro. Just some hilarious lines in there. And Dennis Farina, who
Hmm.
really cracks me up. He's this big Chicago mob boss, and he's just constantly telling people to calm down. And he's pairing that with a food item. He keeps going like, "Everybody, calm down. Have a cream soda or something like that. Will you calm down? We take it easy. Eat a tuna fish sandwich or something like that." And those performances always crack me up like crazy. The most recent TV show is the subject of a lot of confused looks by my wife. She's wondering what the pacing is about, what the characters, why they talk this certain way. And it's the show DTF St. Louis. It's on
Okay.
HBO, and it's from showrunner Stephen Conrad, I believe is his name. And I guess he has a unique approach to pacing and dialogue because I find myself going, would someone say that? But I'm
Uh-huh.
also really intrigued, and I like that he is different in his approach. And this is basically a mystery show. What actually happened on this night? It features Jason Bateman, David Harbour, Linda Cardellini, and my wife and I are pretty hooked on it. Even though she's more frustrated with the sort of stultifying, the weird pacing and idiosyncrasies of the characters and the dialogue, but it's damn good. And then one other plug for a rewatch is a TV show that was really made me jealous. It was called Man Seeking Woman. I don't know if you remember that.
I'm not sure.
I think FX put it out, and I don't know
Okay.
if you remember a Canadian actor by the name of Jay Baruchel. He was kind
Oh
of,
yeah.
yeah, he was kind of like in the Seth Rogen universe, but he's the lead in it, and the writer behind it is Simon Rich.
Okay.
Simon Rich was a Saturday Night Live writer, and he's an author of some really funny books. I believe that series was based on his book called The Last Girlfriend on Earth. And it was really inspiring to see someone who spent their life in sketch writing create a show that is, in essence, a ton of sketches strung together, but done really well and really, really absurdist, really, really surreal. Like, for instance, the first episode, his girlfriend breaks up with him, so it's his adventures after that with various women that he's trying to date or that he falls in love with, and uh, he realizes it's too dangerous to stick your neck out and risk having your heart broken. So
Hmm.
he just wants to date someone steady and reliable. So he ends up dating a 1996 Saturn sedan. That's how weird the show is, but they pull it off. And it was actually the first time I had ever seen actress Britt Lower, who we then would later see in Severance, and she's
Okay.
very good. She plays his sister. So those are my plugs. In terms of what I'm reading, I finally picked up producer Rick Rubin's book, and I think it's called The Creative Act.
Hmm.
And it's really, he when you see Rick Rubin, he's sitting like this with his fingers, in a yoga position in a very spare room with his long white beard, and he really does look like a wise old sage. So I thought I would tap into his insights about creativity. And so I'm just into it, and I'm already on board 100%. A lot of things that I've already come to know, which is creativity is so much less, or maybe not so much less, but many times it is dependent on your ability to receive rather than your ability to find. You know what I mean? Like you have to let ideas sort of come to you. You need to have your radar up. And that
Hmm.
that seems to be the thrust of at least the first part of the book. So I recommend that to
Yeah, I was
people.
going to say I've always because like talking to screenwriters that you can't force creativity. You kind of have to let it you have to let it come naturally, and sometimes that involves you got to step away from your computer. For me it's like I got to take the dog for a walk, and sometimes that's where I get a lot of my best ideas.
Yeah. Do you use voice memo? You ever do
Uh,
that?
f- in a way, I'll jot it down on the notes feature on my phone, just like a couple of words, because I'll know what the idea is and I can expand on it after I get home.
Yeah.
And sometimes I might even have to send an email to myself, like, with the subject line and then a little bit about it in the body of the email.
Yes. I stopped doing that because I didn't trust that I would ever find that email again. So I am also doing the Notes app, which you can use voice record into the Notes app and it'll transcribe it. So that's a good thing. Yeah, you got to just get it down. You have to get these errant thoughts down, and sometimes they will be able to be mashed together to
Hmm.
form something.
Yeah, I was going to say, so two quick addendums to the things you recommended. I think Jay Baruchel, I'm not sure if he wrote and directed the immortal hockey classic Goon, because
I
I
love
think
Goon. I
uh,
love
uh,
that movie.
my wife and I especially liked it because at the time my daughter was very active playing hockey. And so we got a lot of the jokes, a lot more probably than other people would. And when you talked about Midnight Run, I worked at a movie theater that was one of the two movies we had for that summer. And so
Oh,
I was so familiar with that movie uh,
yep.
way back when. But yeah, that is a classic. It's an underrated. I think that was like the first inkling we got that De Niro could actually be funny.
Yes. And when he's talking, I can't remember if he's talking to Grodin and he says, I just remember this line. It's like, so how much money are we talking? And Grodin says, in the neighborhood of $300,000. And then De Niro goes, that's a pretty respectable neighborhood.
Yeah, yeah. And Yaphet Kotto is in that. as Roger
Yes, you're
Mosley.
right. You're right.
That's how that's how much it imprinted on my head. Okay, so Dan, let's talk a little bit about, I guess we call it your origin story. So, I
Sure.
mean, were you always really into comedy growing up? Were you always just writing down jokes? Were you the class clown, or was this something you kind of came into a little bit later in life?
I I think it developed pretty early, and I think how it developed was through funny friends at school. I wasn't that interested early on in making the whole class laugh, but I was interested in making my friends laugh. And I remember in first grade, me and my friend Tommy Mullen, we had these, we remember the metal, like rectangular lunch boxes
Sure.
that became collector's editions. You know, you could have a Planet of the Apes one or a
Right.
Star Wars one or an NFL one.
Hmm.
I, for some reason, had one that had the metric system on it. I'm like, why do I have this? I guess
Wow.
I thought it was cool. I don't know, but it was like a nerd's lunchbox. But I remember me and Tommy Mullen we were karate chopping our lunchboxes and then acting out how much our hands hurt afterwards. And that was just like, how over the top would you hold in the pain and then, and start to cry, or would you do a lot of over the top movements? I think we were probably aping like Tim Conway and
Okay.
Bob Hope and like people we had seen our parents watching, or people from SNL, whether it was John Belushi or even Joe Piscopo or people like that we just enjoyed the mechanics of being funny from an early age. And then later, I think people would say in high school, they would say, oh, yeah, Dan Cronin was a class clown. I would deny that. I would say,
Hmm.
no, I was the funniast guy in school, but I wasn't the class
Ah.
clown. Because to quote David Letterman, most class clowns that I know ended up in prison. That's what he said. But yeah, in essence, as I got older, I think I used humor as social capital because I was kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. I would have
Hmm.
some jock friends, I'd have some nerd friends, I'd have some theater and music performing friends. I was kind of all over the map, and I humor was like the one language that would grant me access to everyone. And beyond that, in my extended family, humor was highly regarded.
Mm.
My dad was a witty, funny guy on the border of corny, but I still enjoyed it. I enjoyed all his bad dad jokes,
Hmm.
um, including like when we had friends over and they would go to use the bathroom. He would say, "Hey, give him my name. You'll get a good seat," which I always thought was bad but funny.
Until
Or
you
like,
used it with your own daughters.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I had uncles that were more dry than my father, but they were more cerebral. That one was a doctor, one was a lawyer, and I really looked up to them and looked up to the opportunity to make them laugh for sure. And then I think in terms of late night, the best way to describe my sensibility is Carson would be the one that I would watch the monologue with my dad, and that was a bonding experience, but Letterman was the one that I snuck down to see.
Hmm.
That's the one I would sneak out of bed and not turn a light on and just turn on the TV really low. And I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was so bizarre and weird, and it almost looked like, dude, does the network even know he's filming this? Those early days of Letterman really made a mark on me. And so so that was my childhood origin story. And then I would go on in high school and I did stand up for the very first time at a high school talent show.
Wow.
And I was doing an impression of the hall monitor, who was this really officious guy with a mustache who thought he was guarding a prison or a military complex. And just other things that people related to. And it was a real rush. And I did it a
Hmm.
couple more times in college, but it wasn't until I got to New York City, and I did not go there with the direct plan to get into comedy. I didn't think comedy was a serious career. Like no one told me that that was something you could do. I had a very middle class upbringing in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which is down near Philadelphia. So by the time I got to New York City, I got a job at an ad agency. And I was like,
Hmm.
this is how I start off. This is a creative business. And I wasn't even a copywriter yet. I would later become one, and that was kind of like my side career and day job. But when I got to New York, that this comedy wasn't a real goal. It quickly would become one because I'd be like, who are you kidding? Of course, this is what you want to do.
Hmm.
There's comedy clubs on every corner.
I,
That's where Letterman is taped. That's where Saturday Night Live is taped. You can see it. So it wasn't long before I started going to open mic nights.
hmm.
And um, so this is like mid 90s at this point. And there was a place on the Lower West Side of New York City called Rebar. And a lot of guys before that were from the state had a show there, a
Okay.
comedy group, the state out of NYU. And we kind of took it over. It was almost like they had abandoned it. So the place wasn't cool anymore, but it had a little bit of a name as a comedy place. And a bunch of unknowns, my group, took it over and we did stand-up nights there. And that's really where a lot of us got started. And then we gradually would be all around the city at Stand Up New York and um, the New York Comedy Club, Catch a Rising Star every once in a while. Catch a
Hmm.
Rising Star, the second location on the west side was the first place I ever did like a real weekend comedy set. And I remember I was on the same bill as Joy Behar and
Okay.
Louis C.K.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was a big jump up from open mic nights. But yeah, that's kind of my origin story. I had really funny female cousins. I had a bunch of cousins that cracked me up. My uncles, my dad. So I saw it as a really valuable thing. And comedy was very positive in my life.
Hmm.
It wasn't a case of the sad clown. I would later realize, like, oh wait, of course I'm a sad clown. All comedians have some sad side of them. And for me, I think the sadness doesn't come from a horrible pain or trauma from my youth. I think it comes from the realization that the world is so incredibly cruel and boring. And I think comedy is where I wanted to play in response to that. And I loved late night. The thing I loved about late night is that it's a built-in commentary. I saw what it meant to my dad to be able to come home and laugh at the world through the eyes of this host and Letterman and Conan through the eyes of the writers and the staff and the
Hmm.
performers. And I absolutely valued the place that late night had in our culture and in America. And I wanted to be a part of that because I thought I could add to that
Hmm.
show's voice, both having the voice of the host and letting my own voice be unleashed.
Actually, I want to address that just for a little bit. So, did it take you time to develop, your quotes and quotes comedy voice that, you started in high school and I guess you did it through college and then after you got to New York, was it like a lot of refining or like were you kind of like this is the kind of material I want to do from the outset, or did it time for you to kind of realize what was the best fit for you and the way for you to do it?
I think the things that I found funny came pretty naturally, but I think I would have admitted to not knowing what my comedy voice was early on. But
Hmm.
maybe I really did. Because I don't feel that my sensibility has changed much over the year. But I think back then I had an ability to doubt myself and compare myself to everyone else.
Hmm.
And in that vein, I thought I was like many other observational medium energy white dudes, quite frankly. But that's not really what my friends would say. That's not what compliments um would reveal. Like the compliments I got was someone said to me, Dan, you're really good at making mundane details into large bits that are absurd. And I was like, well, that's kind of my sweet spot, like
Hmm.
where the mundanity of everyday life can leap off into somewhere else. That's why I loved, for instance, the sketch group Kids in the Hall.
Hmm.
I thought they did that really well. But to answer your question, did it take a long time? Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think when any artist or writer or stand-up starts out, they're probably aping some of the moves and some of the tricks of the people that they've admired. I think that's completely normal. And then as you get comfortable on stage and you get comfortable being around other comics and cracking up other comics, that was the most important thing is having a a community that I could jump into. Um, it's so important to be able to hear what they're saying, come back with a rejoinder, hear their joke, which may inspire a completely different joke in you.
Hmm.
That's the big thing is the comedic dialogue, and that's what I think honed my voice and made me someone valuable to have in a writer's room. But a lot of advice I give to young people when they talk to me, I think this quote came from one of my coworkers, Andre Dubuchet, who was a really funny writer and performer. He said, "Go somewhere, go to a city, and struggle for 10 years." Struggle. That's great
Yeah.
advice. It could be your city, San Francisco. It could be my city, LA. It could be Chicago. It could be Boston, Seattle, New York, Atlanta, whatever. It's not just New York and LA. I think it makes sense if you can swing those two places. But I really did like starting out in New York because there's just such a proximity you have to each other and to the clubs that you're bouncing around and you can do 3, 4 shows a night if you're
Yeah.
lucky. Maybe not as much anymore, but I think it's kind of a city that is so buoyant and that is kind of an incubator for talent. Just by virtue of bouncing off one another and bouncing off other people and seeing 500 things, 100 of which might be funny day to day, just being on the subway, just interacting with people.
Sure. Did you ever do the road comic thing? Like go like up to Boston or upstate New York or rural Pennsylvania, that kind of stuff?
Very, very little. I was
Hmm.
never a touring comic, but I would get road gigs. And I remember someone said, "Hey, do you want to do 45 minutes out at Lehigh University in Pennsylvania?" And like 45 minutes at that point was a miracle that I lasted on stage that long. But yeah, I made good money. I went rode along with another comic, and I would do that from time to time. Absolutely. There'd be shows up in Connecticut. There'd be shows in Boston. I remember doing like Nick's Comedy Stop and then the Comedy Studio in Harvard Square, one of the best audiences I've ever been in front of. Yeah, there would be road opportunities, but nothing compared to the people like Jackie said she would be on the road, what, 32 weeks out of the year. Jackie
Yeah.
Cashian, that is. Laurie Kilmartin, another writer that I worked with at Conan, as well as Brian Kiley. They have all the stories of, staying in the quote unquote comedy apartments. You ever heard of those things like where the owner of the comedy club either owns or rents out an apartment just for the comics?
I
Those
have heard of
sound
that.
so scary to me. Yeah, I don't know if I would have made it. I feel like I really needed to be talking to city audiences, and
Hmm.
that might just be insecurity on my part. It's not really snobbery or anything, but I think it's more the things that I would be talking about. I, I guess I don't know, but it didn't. And I also was holding down a day job a lot of the time, so a lot of my shows were kept to the city.
Hmm.
But yeah, I have lots of memories of just weird random night emceeing things or yeah, going to comedy clubs that are further upstate and that was a good
Hmm.
part of it. It's a good way to when you get paid for being funny, it really adds to your confidence for sure. Because not all
Sure.
the gigs in the city were paying. Many of
Hmm.
them were not.
Okay. So you're busy doing the stand up, going to a couple of clubs a night. So what was the impetus for joining Conan? Did someone come to you? I mean, I've heard like for SNL, you have to fill out like a comedy packet, like all these different kinds of ideas, and you send it in. If they like it, I guess they bring you in for an interview. So is it the same kind of thing for when you're writing for Conan, or is it they like, hey, we saw your set at this club, we think we like your voice, come and talk to us?
I mean, it could be that way if I were more established or famous, or
Okay.
they could have totally said, "Hey, we saw your stand-up down at Gotham Comedy Club. You're incredible. Would you like to come in and talk to us?" That has happened before. Not to me, not at all. Yes, all of these shows will accept like a writer's packet. And word gets out either from your agent or your manager or just word on the street, like, hey, so and so left, so they're probably going to be hiring another writer in the next few months. And you hear about it and you send it in. The first time I ever got any traction was when I was writing with a partner this guy named Brian Tucker, who's a great success story. He's another guy you'd maybe love to have on this podcast. He came from Chapel Hill, so University of North Carolina, and did sketch comedy stuff there and toured with his sketch group. But he doesn't really fit the mold of an SNL writer. Like he didn't have any connections to Canada, SCTV, or Second City, or the Groundlings, or anything like that. And he's had one of the longest runs at SNL of anyone I know of. And he's a great writer. So back before he got that job at SNL, he's still there, by the way. Um, we sent in a packet to Letterman and we got an interview. And like, oh my God, my imagination was running wild. Then we get into the interview and we meet with the then head writer, Rodney Rothman. And he goes, well, we're not hiring anyone right now. We just liked your stuff and we're meeting with you. I must have gone ashen white, and I don't think I said another word for the rest of the interview. I was so angry and so sad. And Brian very rightly, he did the smart thing and he kept talking and he had a nice conversation with him. And I was just, you might as well have just covered me with a tarp at that point. Like I became a piece of furniture. So that was pretty early on. And then at the same time, I would send packets to Conan. I think I sent two or three before I even got a nibble. And finally, I got an interview, and I went in and I met with Mike Sweeney, who was the head writer who would later hire me. And he was also the head writer of the Oscars. And I think he's one of the executive producers. He certainly should be. Um, it was me, Mike Sweeney, and Conan O'Brien. And I said, check this out. I was like, this is probably the only all Irish entertainment meeting, showbiz meeting taking place in America right now. Sweeney, Cronin, O'Brien. Um, and we had some good laughs. They were nice, but I didn't get the job. And
Hmm.
the two people who they hired at that time were Dimitri Martin, very
Hmm.
successful writer and stand-up. He had his later have his own show on Comedy Central. And then the other guy was Dan Gore, who was one of the creators of Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Okay.
And he's had an incredible career, fantastic, great writer, super, super smart guy. And I was devastated. I didn't get it. But my friend Peggy O'Brien said to me, like, no, 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 you're failing among more successful people. You're kind of like failing upwards or something. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I got it the next time. I think I handed in maybe my third or fourth packet. And then I was asked for some more supplemental materials showing that I could react to the news of the week,
Hmm.
send some brand new stuff. And I finally got the job, and that was exciting. And that was the end of 2005. So I mentioned the mid 90s when I was starting out stand up. This was 10 years later. I mean, I was 32 years old. I do have some regrets that it didn't start earlier, but I'm glad it happened at all. And it was a result, partially a result of that struggling and of those years of honing my voice and watching shows and seeing how these shows work. And not only watching it, but appearing on it. When I was hired, I had been on the show a couple times as a performer.
Hmm.
And that's just through friends that work there. I had a friend named Andy Blitz who might be listed as Andrew Blitz in credits, but you've definitely seen him. I think he just recently wrote for the Teddy Bear Show with the Family Guy crew. Um, he was a hilarious guy. He was one of the first stand-ups in my kind of group or class, I guess you would call it. to get a late night job. And so, they keep your name around when they
Hmm.
need someone for a sketch. And part of it is just being known and being known as a non-crazy person who's not an
Sure.
a-hole. And so he would call me in. So then my name kind of maybe was bouncing around a little bit more, and I was ultimately hired off of my, like I said, my third or fourth packet. And I feel like maybe I was too prescriptive of myself and where I belonged, but I had this idea that some of the funniest people I was seeing on stage in like improv shows like the UCB. I was like, well, those are the guys who are going to star in sitcoms. That's not me. And then, there'd be like this really smart, learned guy who writes screenplays. I was like, well, those are the screenplay guys. Where do I fit? I'm a late night guy. I've always loved late night. This is a way where I can be in show business, but also be in what could end up being a really secure job. So
Hmm.
I don't know if I was limiting to myself, but I still think I probably did the right thing because late night was a great fit for me. And it was a place where I actually grew and became learned how to be in a room. I was pretty green when I first got in that room, and my God, I was surrounded by some funny people. And it took a while to kind of get your footing, know when to pipe in, know whether the idea that's in your head should stay in your head or come out of your mouth or not. And gradually over the years, I've become one of the more prolific voices in that room, thanks to what I learned over the years.
I was going to ask, what is regarding the writer's room? Like, what was a typical day? I mean, was it, you have to monitor the news, follow, pop culture, see what's going on, come in, and I guess the head writer says, okay, what have you got? And like, does everybody submit like five or six jokes? I mean, what's the process for putting all of
Well,
that together?
when you watch a TV show about a TV show, so 30 Rock, for
Hmm.
instance, they always have that grid in the background. They always have the yellow, blue, pink cards
Hmm.
forming a grid, forming the schedule for the week. That is that's where your eyes go. There's one on the wall, and there's one that comes around. Here's the grid for the week or for the day. And it's all about what open spot is left there. Or it's about what huge event just happened that we absolutely have to talk about. Um, so for instance, if we came into work on a Monday and we found out that the Act One Conan doesn't want to do it anymore, or it's just not quite there yet. We have to come up with something. We have to scramble. That could be an all hands on deck thing where you might even get, very rarely this would happen, but you might even get an email on Sunday saying, "Hey, let's get in it. Let's get in it like 8:30 or 9." Very rarely, but
Hmm.
9 o'clock, and let's everybody write 10 jokes for, say, celebrity surveys. It's a desk piece.
Hmm.
And then he'll read the beats. The head writer will read the beats in the room blindly. It won't be like, okay, here are Dan Cronin's jokes.
Okay.
It's all blind. So that's very democratic. I like that. Um, if the joke's funny, it gets a laugh. If it doesn't,
It's
it's
out.
not in. It's
Yeah.
and other days wouldn't be so all hands on deck scrambling to get something on. It would more be like, does anyone have any idea for a short bit that could go in the monologue, a videotape piece, or hey, the musical guest canceled or whatever. We need a sketch in the middle of the show. So people could get maybe an hour or so to work on ideas, and then we'd all pile into the head writer's office was the writer's room. So it
Hmm.
was the head writer's desk and then a bunch of couches all around. And oh, it was such a fun place to be. Um, just just half the time would be spent, fucking around, of
Hmm.
course. I don't know if I can say that on this podcast. You can
It's
beep it
okay.
out.
It's a grown up podcast. I'm
Yeah.
I'm sure there are a lot no small children listening to this thing. I want to be
Yeah.
a comedy writer.
Invariably, like when we would be messing around in the room and just topping each other one after the next, like rolling over laughing and not doing work, and we'd all realize we have to get back to work because we have a show to produce, that's when Conan would come in and riff even further and take us further off the rails because he always wanted to come in and entertain us, or in some cases be entertained and be talking about something, or he would go into character or something.
Hmm.
But the system was one of constantly, quote unquote, feeding the beast because it's 4 shows a week, 5 shows when we were at the short-lived Tonight Show, which was brutal. But you're constantly filling up these holes and trying to beat what you already have. If there's something that's on the grid, like, okay, that should work. Well, that's open season for everyone else to be like, well, I thought of this because over the weekend there was this weird story about a new trend,
Hmm.
and we'd come up with something. Like I remember, do you remember when there was like I think the whole thing was a hoax, wasn't it? There was like a big silver balloon that was flying away, and there was a rumor that there was a boy that was tethered to the balloon,
Oh,
and they were calling him,
it sounds vaguely familiar. Yeah, it's
yeah,
from at least a good number of years ago.
they were calling him Balloon Boy.
Balloon Boy.
Yeah, I remember us doing a bit on that, like things like that would come up. And then I remember around the same time, a little after that, there was the singer John Parr who sang the St. Elmo's Fire theme. And
Okay.
he sang this horrible cover of his own song called Tim Tebow's Fire.
Oh
So you
God.
remember who Tim Tebow was?
Tim Tebow was a very religious quarterback.
Yes,
I remember that.
exactly. So it was Tim Tebow's Fire. So then I came up with the idea that John Parr has been doing this for every news story. He's trying to just franchise his song out. So it was like Balloon Boy's Fire. It was Sullenberg's Fire, that Sullenberger, the pilot who
Hmm.
landed safely in the Hudson. And I sang that and had to go down with the band, and it was just so fun. But there's lots of things like that where it pops up. There's an opportunity to make something funny, and boom, it's in the show. Then you get to push back something like your celebrity surveys or a bit we could do at any time.
Right.
And that's great. Then now that's money in the bank because you're constantly in a fire department trying to put out the fires of emptiness. Wherever there's no comedy, there's fire. That means we need something. Oh God. But when you have comedy to fill up this hole, and whether it's act one, act two, act three,
Hmm.
or four, then we're back on terra firma. So that's
Okay.
what it's like. It's very much all hands on deck. You do get some time to work autonomously. And now I'm talking about what it was like to write a Conan. I assume it's similar
Hmm.
at other shows. Maybe the Daily Show, they're a little bit more all in one room the whole time. That might be more like a uh, triage where everyone's there because you're looking at every word that's coming out of the president's mouth and so forth. Maybe that's different, but we had a little bit of autonomy in our own offices. Um, but then you would always come back together and we would try to get things on its feet. Even if it was me writing my own sketch with no help, I might come into the writer's room and say, I need some help with this ending, or this middle part seems to drag. Can you guys help me out? If we have time for that.
Hmm.
Uh, but otherwise, we might be already looking forward to the next day. We're going to do, if we have enough, we can do this desk piece, or we can do this sketch in the middle of the show. Or, hey, Todd, do you have another idea for another one of those segments that you did 2 weeks ago? Could you bang out another one? So it's just all about making sure this show is going to be funny every single day, which is a tall order,
Sure,
really tall
sure.
order.
I wanted to ask, you mentioned, did you tend to write by yourself a lot, or did you have like a frequent collaborator, or was it kind of like, hey, this guy or this person is really good at this kind of joke, I go to them, or like, was it just like a lot of mutual work, or kind of like I'm going to go off into my office or over to my desk, I'm going to focus on this and like seeking out help when needed?
Both.
Mm,
Sometimes I would be door closed working on an idea that came to me when I was high on my couch at 1:30 a.m. the night before. But other times I would be paired up with someone, either because the head writer said, "Hey, go work with Jose on this idea he has," or Jesse has an idea and you had a couple of ideas in the room. Do you guys want to write that together? Or someone would ask me to write with them. So I was a pretty good freelancer that could be available to everyone. I would say that the two people I wrote with the most were two of my oldest friends from the New York stand-up days. One being Todd Levin,
hmm
who has since moved back east. He worked for Jimmy Fallon for a year after the show. He completed the run of Conan with us in 2021. And he's now working on I guess it's like a dramedy. It's from the creator of Monk. It's a show called Einstein, but it's a big step up for him. It's an hour long, and he's doing very well there. I hope we get to see it soon, and I hope it gets another season. So Todd Levin was someone I always had a shorthand with him. We always seemed to laugh at the same things, and we would end up crying laughing together. And he was a new addition to our Oscar staff this past year. It was so great to be in the same room with him. The other person is someone I mentioned earlier named Andre Dubuchet, who really talk about a comedic voice. I mean, his I feel like was formed quite early. He's quite a decisive person, and he has kind of his own he has his own absurdist language that I find really interesting and very cerebral too. So I would pair off with him and write lots of stuff. His office was right next door to me. But if you look at it, they always have the initials after the bit. It would be DC/ADB or ADB/DC if it was his idea and I was helping him with it. You probably could find my initials paired up with almost every writer on staff. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed both. I
hmm
really did. Probably writing with someone else a little bit more. But if I had an idea that the head writer was like, "Oh yeah, go do that," that felt great. And that felt great to just say, "Okay, he believes in it. I know what it is. I'm going to close the door for a couple hours and bang it out."
Okay,
So
that's great.
yeah, it was really a place that gave you the variety, the opportunity to do either.
Okay, so that's Conan in New York. So sounds like you followed him to LA for the
And
short-lived
LA. Yeah, I'm
The
referring
Tonight
to
Show.
LA as well. Yeah. Oh, you
Oh,
want to talk about that era?
well, I want to touch on it briefly because I also want to get
Sure.
to writing for the Oscars as well. But you said
Yeah.
it was an experience working on The Tonight Show. It sounds like it was significantly different than working on late night.
Yes, and ironically, where we'd end up 6 months later at TBS and the Warner Brothers, that was way more similar to New York than the Tonight Show was. The Tonight Show experience was very strange because there was there was sort of tension coming from the top.
Hmm.
Now, I have to say that Conan and the executive producers and the head writer, they did such a great job of protecting us. Now, we were all grown men and women, but we must be seen as like the kids. It was
hmm
like a Catholic family. It's like, okay, kids, just you guys go play. Mommy and daddy are going to talk to the lawyers right now. It was that kind of a thing. I
Yeah.
think in the background there's network notes and all this stuff. And there was also just the origin story of that whole situation, which is a weird, never before seen and never since seen thing where a network makes a decision 5 years in advance. I mean, Conan was
hmm
named for the Tonight Show so far in advance in a way that just seems incredibly odd to me now. But the whole thing involved us moving our families out to Los Angeles from New York for this big job that might last the rest of our careers, or at
Yeah.
least 10 to 15 years. And it was over in 6 months. And now when we got to the stage on Universal, everything felt weirdly temporary to me. I thought the stage and backstage area seemed odd. It seemed like it had been built in a hurry, and the cavernous space of the theater was nothing like the cozy
hmm
Studio 6A in New York that we had that would fit, I don't know, 200 to 300 people. This was much bigger. And so that was intimidating. It was like, okay, that means you're going to have to do the type of comedy that fills up a bigger room, that might be a little more broad. It might get us away from our sensibility. The entire thing was strange. And when I look back on it, there's actually some really funny stuff that we did, but it was probably wasted in that time slot and probably wasted in a quasi pre-internet era. It wasn't pre-internet, but
Hmm. The
it
early
wasn't the
stages.
same. Yeah, in 2009, 2010, I mean, we didn't share things as much as we do now, or people aren't used to watching things, and people weren't used to watching things in clip form the way we are now. But the TBS show, that was a huge part of it. Internet audience was a huge part and of YouTube clips being shared. A lot of my stuff would be passed around, and that always felt great. So, yeah, the Tonight Show was strange. So
Yeah.
I moved my whole family here. My girls were in kindergarten, and I was out of work by January.
Oh
But we
man.
did the smart thing. The first day, I went skiing. Drove out to Mount Baldy. It was great. I went skiing. And then right after that, I said, we're going to Hawaii. That's not me. Like I should think I would have holed up in a ball and started panicking, but I didn't. I took us on a great vacation, and I think found out soon after that we were going to TBS.
Hmm.
And that went from 2010 to 2021.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah.
I looked through doing my research. I found an article, I guess it was maybe even the Wikipedia entry about the whole Tonight Show thing. I had to stop after like 5 minutes because it just kept going on and on. I mean, it didn't really talk about the writers. It was more about Conan and the producers and NBC and all of the people, like all the higher ups. And just it kept going on. And then it gets into the legal aspects of it all. It's like, oh my God, this thing is just never ending.
As I was living through that, I was so not interested. Like I'm not interested in boardroom machinations. I'm like, tell me when I show up to work because that's what I'm interested in is being paid to create stuff.
That's great. Okay, so you went from the Tonight Show to TBS, and that ended in 2021. And then I believe it was last year was the first year that Conan was tapped to host the Oscars.
Yeah.
And so, what was the process for that? I mean, did he just was it? I guess it sounds like a lot of his former writers from the shows. He said, "Okay, come in and do this," because I know I've heard Laurie Kilmartin talking about this that you had to watch, I guess, every single movie that was nominated, or at least the Best Picture and the higher ups, and then you had to come up with jokes for not just the monologue but throughout the show. And I also heard that Conan went around Los Angeles. I know this was this year. Excuse me. He went around to clubs and I guess test driving the material.
He did.
And
Yeah.
so first of all, talk about like putting all of the jokes together, but then go. I really want to hear more about this whole. He. I heard like a whole bunch of writers had to go out with him to monitor the audience reactions to the jokes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that was the goal. We want to see how the jokes do. I think monitoring is a strong,
Well,
dry word, but yeah, yeah. We did. Yeah, we wanted to see how these things would do when they're up on their feet. I have a question is like, is what is the best place to hear these jokes? It's tough because that room is so unique. It's a room filled with people who are maybe they're self-absorbed in the moment, or maybe they always are. But they're not necessarily there to laugh. They're there to hear their name called, to make a speech. They have a lot of things on their mind. Some of them are serious filmmakers, and it, it's a hard process to figure out what is going to work on that night. But I do think when Conan goes up 6 to 8 times and one joke just kills every single time, like okay, that is some good valuable feedback. Um, I going back to last year, so the first time he did it, I remember, some of the people started a little earlier. I think some of the monologue guys started a little earlier, and then I was asked to come in, which was great. And I remember my first meeting on Zoom, I just felt like my comedy muscles had atrophied.
hmm.
And I was trying to pitch in and I hadn't seen all the movies and I was just overwhelmed. I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And then I quickly realized, well, no one's seen all the movies yet. It's only January. You don't have to really see every single movie. We want to see every single movie. You should see most of the nominees for I mean, all of the nominees for the big categories for sure, but you don't need to see every single nominated movie. What ends up happening is you do watch them because the Academy provides you with access to their screening app. And so every single movie is in there. And oh my gosh, that's a treat.
Mm.
I will add to what have I been watching? I'll add this movie out that was shot secretly in Iran called It Was Just an Accident. And I believe there was some, I believe that was up for an award this year. Um, that's incredible. I mean, imagine the stress of shooting in a country where the regime could potentially throw you in prison for life or worse if you get caught. So that's a movie I'd recommend. But you gradually see the picture come into focus, so to speak. Some movies will not be nominated. Some movies feel like they're a big deal, but they're not. Some movies feel like they're going to be ignored, but then they get some buzz and some attention. And you see the preceding award shows like the Golden Globes, the SAG Awards.
Mhm.
There's 8 million award shows now, which makes it tough. We also have to watch those monologues to see what jokes are now off limits, especially Nikki Glazer, because she's someone we really, really admire. And she has a great writing staff with her. So we definitely watch what she does. And so the whole process comes into focus. You don't that first day when I was overwhelmed by all this information, I finally said, okay, calm down, Dan. This is we're gonna know what our targets are. We'll be more honed in on them the closer we get. But the approach is not all that different from being on Conan. The difference is we're writing towards one night.
Mm.
So that's what's strange. Um, you almost get into the rhythm of writing so much that you're like, hey, what are we doing for today's show? Oh, right, there isn't a show today. There's a show on March 15th, which is the Oscars. Okay, right. Um, but it's a similar, it's pretty similar to writing on Conan, but I would say the difference is we're all at one table, so it's a concentrated writer's room. It's an all hands on deck. And there's still the reading out loud. We read mono jokes, and we'd sometimes go around the room, give everybody a chance to use their voice, and the best readers would make the best jokes shine better. But everyone did a good job at that. And then you pitch bits for elsewhere in the show, whether it's a pre-tape bit or getting a celebrity to do something. And I
Mhm.
produced the bit with Jane Lynch this year because it was making fun of the Oscars being on YouTube. So we had these YouTube videos interrupting the broadcast. Um, and she was awesome, by the way. Highly recommend meeting Jane Lynch. She was so funny and cool. Uh, but maybe it's a little more competitive. Maybe
Mhm.
that adds an edge to it. And it's a lot of ups and downs because you could feel like, holy crap, I'm writing half the show. I got six monologue jokes in. Boom, they're all gone the next week because other writers wrote better jokes or just more recent jokes that feel like they have a better chance or jokes on a subject that we agree is going to be a bigger movie, like if someone has a Sinners bit or
Mhm.
a One Battle After Another joke or bit. The other thing is agreeing on a cold open idea. That's a huge thing. Last year we ended up doing a really simple cold open idea. There was a movie with Demi Moore called The Substance, and we had
Right.
Conan climbing out of Demi Moore's body. It was a nice, simple bit, and it kind of telegraphed the whole evening that said, "This is what a Conan Oscars looks like." And it's silly, it's visual, but buckle up, it's going to be fun. And I think we really set off the tone really well with that. This year's was much more. Oh, the air conditioning is clicking on. I hope that didn't alarm your
Didn't
audience.
didn't hear a thing.
All right, good. But this year's was more of a longer, big swing, kind of a harkening back to the Billy Crystal style of
Right.
inserting the host into all these different movies, which in some ways we kind of like, is that what we want to do? A lot of the writers were like, at first, I don't know, do we want to go that route? And then when you start coming up with beats with Conan specifically doing it, it's like, this is too much fun. The
Mm.
audience is going to love this. This is what we're doing. Yeah, for sure. And Conan is game for that kind of stuff. I mean, he puts on the Aunt Gladys makeup, and
Hmm.
we were shooting on a soundstage. One of our former writers, he only spent like a year with us. He's my neighbor now, Scott Gardner, but he's especially good at directing. He's a director, maybe even more than he's a writer, although I don't want to take away anything from his writing because he's hilarious as well. But he put together that cold open and helped direct that, and he was excellent at that. Um, he did direct that. He directed that and the other pieces. He's really good. So it was interesting to be with a really great crew and see Conan rise to the occasion and have us there to chime in with whatever notes or ideas we might have. And then the show happens and we're backstage. We're backstage as Conan comes off, and anything that comes top of mind, you can pitch it to him in the moment, and he's staying pretty loose, but he's watching, and it's an exciting night, and it's a gig that is so much fun, and it's sad to say goodbye to because it's like you're work, 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 and we're over at his podcast headquarters and office in Larchmont neighborhood of LA, and then we move to the Dolby, and then the night happens, and then that's it, and then I'm here back in my empty house talking to you,
Well, I
which
hope it
is
wasn't too much of a letdown after building
which
up
is
to the
fun
Oscars.
too, which is fun too.
Well, good.
Yeah.
I'm really
So
glad to hear that. Yeah, I was going to ask. You said like the writers are backstage. Was there a lot of last minute changes or sudden like, oh hey, here's let's switch out this joke for this thing I just came up with type of stuff?
this year it seemed to be a lot more like, let's move this down, move this around. Like let's do this joke here. Let's scrap that joke. We were definitely aware that we were running long, and we were definitely aware that there was a good amount of Conan time already. So yeah, even I think I even said we don't have to do that next joke, and it was mine. And
Hmm.
it's because you know what? Let's keep the show moving. We're doing pretty well now. There's a momentum. And I would say that it felt a little different this year. I think last year was so new. There was just a novelty to it and a surprise element to it. And I personally thought the audience this year was a little bit more tight. I don't know why, but it kind of took them a little while to get going. But Conan is performing at a level that I think is better than any other point of his career. I think he's so comfortable with himself right
Hmm.
now, and so comfortable being in the same room as celebrities because that's all he does for a living besides his travel show as he talks to people on his podcast. I think he's I think he's comfortable in his own skin in a way that he almost never has been. So that's
Yeah.
a huge advantage and something to mention about this particular gig. That is one thing that's different about banging out 4 shows in a week. No, we're all working towards the one big show.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so this year's Oscars in the past. So
Mhm.
what are you working on now? I mean, what do you have coming up? I mean, I'm assuming you're going to be part of next year's because I think he's been asked to come back next year to host as well.
I
So,
never
but
count
until
any
until those
chickens.
meetings reconvene,
Yes, I never count any chickens before they hatch, but Conan,
sure.
Mike, I am available. I'm here. I'd love to come back. But besides that, I'm like any other writer in Hollywood. Now, the one thing I mean, I think I touched upon it, but I do other kinds of writing. I mean, I've done advertising writing in my lifetime. In fact, I went from the Oscars right into a week of freelance work, which was great. It was different. It was I had to kind of readjust my thinking in my brain, but that kind of stuff comes up. And I also have a relationship with the people over at Audible, owned by Amazon, because I used to work with some of them when they were Wondery. I worked on this podcast called "Tis the Grinch" holiday podcast that's not coming back this year, but I hope that it comes back maybe in some form next year. But playing the Grinch was James Austin Johnson, who famously does Trump on Saturday Night Live. He's a brilliant performer. He's a hilarious guy, an improviser, a great writer. And so I'm in touch with the people at Audible, and I'm working on ideas to develop with them. So I'm excited about that. A little closer to home, there's another podcast called Valley Heat, of which I am a recurring character. Valley Heat, I would say it's almost like a weird neighborhood watchy type Curb Your Enthusiasm set in Burbank among all these weird fictional stores and businesses that have their own advertisements in the show. There's even been a few live shows. So the next time there's a live show at Largo, there was just one last month. Uh, I recommend I recommend checking that out. This is the product of a guy named Christian Duguay and his wife Emily Maya Mills and a bunch of other really creative musicians and comics that appear in the podcast, including people like Beth Stelling and Patton Oswalt. So Valley Heat, I definitely recommend checking that out. But beyond that, yeah, it's the writer's life. It's get up, sit at the computer and get to work. Get to work. Put something on the page. You can't remain blank forever.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
You touched on this a little bit earlier, but I always like to ask the guests, like, what advice do you have for writers in that field? Usually it's authors and about a specific kind of like a genre or a type of book that they write. But for someone who wants to get into writing comedy, or someone not just stand up, but like, oh, I want to write for a late night show, or I want to write a pilot.
Yeah.
For a sitcom,
Mhm.
what would advice would you pass along to those kinds of writers?
I think I mentioned the go to a city and struggle for 10 years.
You did
That's
mention
that,
that.
that's part of it. But I think um, the most important thing is to develop a body of work, whether you're producing a show at your dorm or your campus coffee shop, or you're putting out a blog, or you're making videos on YouTube. I mean, people are still breaking through simply because they're making something. That's what you have to do. Work on your body of work and gravitate to the people who resonate with you comedically, and try to work with them, try to get a coffee with them, and try to create things together. It's intimidating because it's both the best time and maybe the worst time. I mean, there's way more ways for young people now to get their work out to an audience than I ever had when I
Hmm.
was starting out, between YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. Um, but it's also so saturated at a time when things like late night shows are really kind of a thing of the past, kind of a relic of the past,
Hmm.
which makes me sad. Maybe it'll always exist in some form because networks like to have some form of variety show, or some type of commentary on the news, or at least something that's pretty easy to shoot. It's a camera and a guy at a desk or a
Hmm.
woman at a desk or something. So I hope those opportunities don't all dry up, and I hope that the entertainment business stays together. But people are doing it. People are doing it on their own, and there are still. I was amazed at some of the films that we watched for the Oscars this
Hmm.
year. Train Dreams was one of them. What a simple, beautiful movie that was. The one I mentioned called It Was Just an Accident, also really, really fascinating and engaging. And focus on the craft of your work, not the career. I was guilty sometimes. I remember I came off the stage at Gotham Comedy Club. And this must have been late 90s, or no, maybe it was early 2000s. Came off the stage, and people are mobbing me. Great set, you killed. And some guy in a suit almost reaching out through the crowd to pull his business card out to hand it to me. And I was just in my mind, I was thinking, okay, it's going to say William Morris Agency. It's going to say UTA, whatever. It's going to say NBC. And I look at his card and it said McGuire's Comedy Club, Ronkonkoma, Long Island. So, and it was a good reminder to be like, hold on, Dan, you're not quite ready for the big time. You have to have
Yeah.
about 50 more or 100 and 200 more of these types of nights before anyone will even notice you. And it was a very good, humbling experience. You don't need to worry about your career too early. You need to worry about being good. I mean,
Hmm.
Steve Martin said that if you're that good, he said become so good that they can't ignore you.
Yeah.
There are people like that. There's this woman, and I her last name I think is Pilkes, but it might be Pilks. Hannah Pilkes, Pilkes. I just couldn't look away from her videos. She was funny every single time, and she got cast in that sitcom called Leanne. It was on Netflix, and I bet she's going to be cast in more things. I think they could use her on SNL. But there are people that they're just good. They're just funny. And that's what your goal is to be recognized in some way, shape, or form that people will want to read your pilot or your screenplay because they're interested in the way your brain works. So that's my advice.
All right.
Do things and make things.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Dan Cronin, this has been a fascinating but also equally entertaining discussion. So thank you so much for being here today. Where can people find out more about you, like a website, social media?
Sure. Yeah, I think mostly Instagram and TikTok. I'm Dan Cronin Insta on Instagram, and I think that can click through to my Threads account, which I'm finding is completely littered with bots. So I don't know how much I'll be putting there, but I occasionally put some funny thoughts and jokes on there. I'm also on TikTok, Dan_Cronin, I believe. And I also have a website where you can see some of my Conan sketches and commercials and things like that, dancronin.com.
All right. Well, again, Dan, thank you so much for being here today. This was just really, really enjoyable.
I love talking to you, Paul. So thanks and good work by you.
Well, thank you so much. And viewers and listeners, if you enjoyed today's show as much as we did, well, please hit like, feel free to leave a comment and subscribe. I want to point out our theme music for the audio version, still working on the video. That is by Mark Gunyon. For my social media, you can check out my screenwriting blog at maximumz.blog. This show is on Blue Sky at Podcast CWL, and I'm on Blue Sky and Instagram at Pez Screenwriting. And you can check out my Go Ahead and Ask books. They're on Amazon, the ones about screenwriting and pie. Like I said, that's Dan. I'm Paul. This has been the Creative Writing Life Podcast. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and most importantly, go write something.